Hey everyone, it's Joe. If you like what we do here on the show, consider supporting us on Patreon. Just $5 a month gets you access to our entire bonus episode catalog, as well as every regular episode, one full week early. Access to all of our side series that are currently ongoing, and our back catalog of those as well. Gets you ebooks, audiobooks, first dibs on live show tickets and merchandise when they're available, and also gets you access to our Discord, which has turned into a lovely little community. So go to patreon.com/lions led by donkeys and join the Legion of the Old Crow today. Lions led by donkeys. Hello and welcome to the Lions Led by Donkeys podcast union organization meeting. Let the record show that with me today are the elected representatives of the armed men who sleep on Idi Amin's couch. Gentlemen, would you say that Mr. Amin has provided you with a safe working environment?
No.
I've been advised to not answer this from my counsel. My counsel says there's a huge guy who's going to pummel me, so I'm pleading the whatevereth. We have amendments in Uganda, right?
I believe Mr. Amin has taken those away.
I believe that there has been a absolute substandard provision of lodgings and board by Mr. Amin. I mean, like, you can't invite people into your house and provide them with a couch, but expect them to sleep without blankets or cushions. Sure, he provided us with a few sheets of newspaper as a form of a blanketure, but I believe that his provisions are not up to scratch in comparison with his promises that he gave to us, the armed couch surfers.
I actually, prior to this, used Western Union Telegram couch surfing to travel around North Africa, and I had much better accommodations with Muammar Gaddafi. I found that it was actually quite inviting, and my needs were taken care of. I'm not really sure what my politics are now. They're kind of all over the place. But I will say that I'm pretty sure Mr. Amin is aware of the standard. And I personally was told that if I needed a blanket, I should just wait until he found someone to skin alive and I could wear their skin. And I have to be honest with you, I don't think either of those situations is pleasing.
All right, let's move on to our next question here. Let me look over the paperwork. It says here in your pay scale that you're mostly paid in raw gold and ivory. Does this include a pension program or health care? Are you paid any kind of dividends?
Not at present. What we have been provided with is a rudimentary form of dental care. I had what I can best describe as an ouchie in one of my back molars, and Mr. Amin, in his own words, generously extracted the tooth with the pliers and added it to a string necklace. While it did, in the immediate term, relieve the pain caused by the ouchie of said tooth, he did not provide any sort of ivory or gold replacement, and I am at present engaging in an act as I can only describe as gum maxing.
Actually, we did receive information when we first begun our employment that we would have some provisions made for a retirement plan. But I have to be honest, I've never been to Switzerland, so I don't even know if this is a real bank account. And also, Mr. Amin said that he didn't trust the Swiss and he would only bank with Liechtenstein. And I'm not 100% sure that's legal.
And how has Mr. Amin responded to your unionization efforts?
I can confidently say that Mr. Amin has not been in any way amenable to our very, very reasonable demands. We have been subject to a series of threats, such as large men threatening to grind our bones for his bread, and our eyeballs being stolen. But I'll hand it off to my fellow representative, Mr. Bethea.
Mr. Amin said that if we actually pushed forward with unionizing, he said, in 25 years, the Japanese will invent a game about a guy who smashes everything into a big ball, and it's going to be based on you.
Okay, I'll make sure I file this paperwork with the Ugandan office of Katamari Damacy. Thank you, gentlemen. I will make sure that your comments get to the right office, and by that I mean Mr. Amin's desk. Otherwise, I will also be added to the giant ball of scrap. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
I'm thinking about Idi Amin's desk in that, like, because he was so large, did they have a comically large desk to suit his proportions, or did he have a real small desk, much like my IKEA desk in front of me, that made him look exponentially larger?
It's like the guy at that Goku meets after he dies at the giant desk, and he's a tiny guy in front of it. I assume that is Idi Amin's desk.
I don't know. I think Idi Amin would probably have gotten a desk that was proportionate to his size, but I'm interested in what would have been on that desk. Like, what kind of fancy gift paper cutters had he received from Kim Il-sung, Muammar Gaddafi, whoever was running South Yemen, the Saudis, the Israelis. Like, think about what kind of weird flair he would have accrued, and also what kind of gifts these various countries would have said to themselves, hey, I bet you Idi Amin would like this.
He got like a Newton's cradle, but it's just made out of like ball joints from people's legs.
Well, also it's like, go figure, he was such a Tiabu. If only they had Warhammer figurines, he would have loved that shit.
Oh man, Games Workshop could have fixed him for sure. Unfortunately, I probably know what was on his desk, and it's stacks of British newspapers, because he loved reading British rags, which is kind of great. And to say that you looked at something and thought Idi Amin would love this is like the newest insult we've ever developed on the show.
Well, also, I was thinking about he's loved British newspapers, and it's like, if you think about how bad they are now, imagine the Spectator in the 70s. Like, we made the joke about Seth Putnam, but they were probably actually writing articles entitled Hitler was a sensitive man, but Idi Amin was reading them.
Idi Amin picks up the Sun just for page 3.
We actually will have to talk about British media in a little bit.
Of course.
And when we left you last time, Idi Amin came to power in a military coup, murdering tribal enemies allied with the outgoing president, Milton Obote, and then toured the Western world looking for free weapons, only to get shot down. No pun intended. He was growing paranoid of Tanzanian invasions, all while the two countries were already shooting at one another on the contested border. Things are, in short, not going great. And this is generally the end of what could be considered the honeymoon phase between Idi Amin and the UK, as well as the United States, but the US isn't as entrenched in Uganda as the UK is for obvious reasons. And Amin was quick to make things worse, which will be a trend. When 2 Americans traveled to the area where massacres against the Acholi and the Langi soldiers took place, which we talked about in part 1, the Americans disappeared, a fate that was to befall hundreds of thousands of people over the next couple years. The weird part is, Amin at first tried to tank any investigation into the 2 men's murder, but then just kind of shrugged, admitted that the army did it, and then paid out his family some blood money and thought everything was cool. The US was not pleased with this. Meanwhile, things in the army were actually getting even worse, somehow. Remember the numbers from our first episode, after Obote's reforms, when he tried to claw control of the army back from Amin, that a full third of Ugandan military members were either Acholi or Langi, which were, of course, Amin's new enemies. Those men had, at best, been expelled from the military, and at worst, murdered. Thousands of them had fled over the border, knowing that, on a long enough timeline, they're eventually going to get shot. But either way, these people are no longer in the Ugandan military. And the Ugandanization of the military that we talked about in part 1 had not been particularly successful, because it's hard to be successful in anything when the entire institution you're attempting to reform is foundationally corrupt. But it did make gains in a lot of ways. Thousands of men had been trained in the UK, Israel, and China. Hundreds of them had received something resembling a professional military education. A lot of dudes graduated from Sandhurst. But now, the majority of those people were all gone, exiled, imprisoned, or dead thanks to the purges.
Idi Amin did not want to pursue Chinese warfare with Israeli characteristics.
He did keep his picture of Mao Zedong up at his office, though.
Hell yeah.
So basically, that's the one handshake between Idi Amin and the lead singer of the British new wave band Japan.
I'll take your word for it, sure.
I'm just allowed David Sylvian, Idi Amin. They probably could find something in common with one another.
I feel like if you played synthwave to Idi Amin, he would just start punching things, which is mostly how he showed emotions, was by murdering and punching things.
They could have defeated Idi Amin with a single Roland 808.
Just thinking, if you change the lyrics from Life in Tokyo to Life in Kampala, it would probably work. Life is cruel. That probably works. You know, I'm just thinking. There's a lot of opportunities. I mean, back in those days, you had the Rumble in the Jungle. You know, you had Mobutu inviting people to do a big boxing match in Kinshasa.
You know, he was so mad at missing out on that too. Amin would have loved to do that.
Yeah, can you imagine Idi Amin doing the Rumble in the Jungle? Like, Idi Amin beats up Muhammad Ali.
He probably would have insisted that he got in the ring, and then someone would have to take a dive before they were murdered.
Yeah, exactly. God damn it.
But if he had let in, you know, synthesizers, you know, Uganda could have had their own version of like William Onyebor, who's like forgotten about for decades, and then just like cool, trendy people in New York will suddenly discover in 2011.
Ugandan soft cell. I don't know many synth bands. I think I just say the only one that I know.
I mean, I will say that the song that most people know by Soft Cell is Tainted Love, and I feel like if you sing the lyrics, sometimes I feel I need to get away, I need to run away. That probably tracks with the experience of having Idi Amin be mad at you.
That's true.
So
then Amin began to turn against his once allied tribes from the greater West Nile region, which is where his family's from, like the Lugbara tribe, where his mother is a member, for example. He turned against them. He turned against the Mahdi tribe. He put other people on the chopping block. Nobody was safe at this point. Cabinet ministers from those groups were not safe from imprisonment or exile, or in one particular case, the ambassador to the Soviet Union was recalled back to Kampala, and then they found his body floating in the canal the next day.
I feel like killing ambassadors.
Well, it was
granted,
his ambassador.
It's his ambassador, but still, it's like kind of starts to feel like you're gonna make people mad. Like, you know, these are people that have jobs, they have foreign contacts, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, everyone know. It's like getting an invite to the Iraqi embassy in the early 80s. It's like everyone just comes in and was like, yeah, you're gonna get made into mush.
Yeah, you're not long for this position. No one's collecting their pension here.
Social anxiety. Idi Amin is like, before I say anything, please don't get mad. Don't get mad. I may have killed the ambassador.
The Soviet Union didn't seem to care all that much. They were
of course the Soviet Union didn't fucking care.
As we'll get into, they are Uganda's largest creditor, and murdering the guy they had a close relationship with didn't really seem to slow them down much. But to fill all these gaps, Amin quickly went back to work, recruiting new men, mostly, again, from his own region and tribe. But he also began to draw tribesmen, like we said, like the Kakwa and other tribes kind of are going over the border into Congo, but especially Sudan. He recruits people from there as well, which piss off some Ugandans. A lot of men from Amin's own Kakwa tribe are recruited off the street and then immediately promoted to major on day one. And it's important to note that the realities of life for your average Kakwa guy has not changed a lot in the years since independence. So they are still very, very poor. There really is no infrastructure built for them insofar as like further education. A lot of these guys are functionally illiterate and have no standardized education whatsoever. And they walk through the door and are just majors now.
I feel as though that could be a problem for good order and discipline.
Oh boy, is it. You're going to begin to see the foundation of why the actual war that we are going to talk about goes so badly for Uganda. This seemingly overnight reform, if you want to call it a reform, had horrible effects on an already struggling military. Any hint of professionalism, which you could argue the education that the Ugandan military was getting before this was helping build, because it wasn't really there before, it was now gone. Replacing it was mostly just a roving gang with uniforms, guns, and the idea that since the general was also the president, it meant they could do pretty much whatever they wanted. And they were right. The Ugandan military was already turning inwards to destroy what Idi Amin considered political enemies, but they were also victimizing just about anybody they felt like it, or if that person just happened to have something they wanted to steal. They were a gang operating in a weird feudal type situation with commanders of a region being like, no, my gang's in control of this. And by that, they mean like their battalion, and they're all stealing from everybody. And this was done as an official policy, with the soldiers stealing anything of worth, splitting it with their officers, who would in turn split it with their officers, all the way up to Amin personally. who then used stolen money and, of course, a staggering high level of loans to buy more and more weapons, even though he had been refused more modern stuff that he wanted, like the Harrier jump jets, for example. He didn't care that people were selling him what he knew were hand-me-downs. For example, he was buying World War II era surplus Sherman tanks from the United States in the 1970s. He just wanted stuff.
He's just a vintage enthusiast, you know? He's logging on to eBay, trying to find great finds, using like weird search terms to try and get the best deal.
Buying my Sherman tank off of Vinted, hoping it's the right size.
It still comes packaged in like a Tesco bag. The fucking delivery driver's like, yeah, sorry, I couldn't deliver it. I'll be back in like 74 days when it comes back around.
I have to send your package to the Belfast fucking Royal Mail Black site.
The guy who sold him the tank is complaining that he hasn't checked that everything is okay, so Vinted will release his money.
He borrowed more and more money to go on a military construction spree. Famously, this is how Entebbe is built by the Israelis. Hence why they had the blueprints for when they conducted the Entebbe raid, because an Israeli construction firm built it. He builds other things as well. However, while he's doing this, virtually every other part of the Ugandan economy, namely their main exports, cotton and coffee, completely collapse. Within the first year, Amin had borrowed so much money from the IMF that they cut him off, which is impressive for the IMF to do. But the main reason why they did it is he was not trying to pay back any loans, and he was using IMF money on weapons, which you're not allowed to do. He also wasn't paying back any loans anybody gave him, like any states, like the UK, France, or the Soviets, to the point that the Soviets kind of had to keep sending letters like, hey, like, come on, man, like, throw me an extra $5. Don't make me come over there and run your shit.
He's just like the TV license protesters in the UK. He's like, what are you going to do? You can't come here. You can't come into my house and take my shit. What are you going to do?
Idi Amin asking if he's being detained.
That implies the existence of sovereign citizen Idi Amin.
That is a fringed flag. This is not an admiralty court.
The Ugandan economy and normal governmental administration was running out of money so fast that they literally did not have enough money to manage the day-to-day functions of the government, which honestly probably didn't hurt the functioning of the government any more than Idi Amin himself already did. The reason because of this is he was requiring virtually any government function, from the smallest decision-making process by a nameless, faceless civil servant in some far-flung rural region, to be sent to Kampala so he could personally authorize it. He did not understand or believe in the concept of a civil service or a government. He was running it like a fiefdom. Everything must pass through him. And he just wasn't doing that either. Not that any one man could ever possibly keep up with that. So in the end, the Ugandan government functionally stopped working. And this is where the expulsion of Uganda's South Asian population comes in. As the economy craters, Amin decided to put the blame on Uganda's various problems on the South Asian population, who had already been dealing with years of government-driven racist propaganda. The expulsion of Uganda's South Asians wasn't even the first mass expulsion that Amin had undertaken, but it was definitely the most damaging to the country as a whole. The goal, at least according to him, was to get rid of people he saw as outsiders who were benefiting from colonial wealth given to them as British subjects who had been brought in to oppress the native Ugandans. And now that he was getting rid of them, tens of thousands of people, their wealth, their businesses, and their careers would then all be redistributed to Black Ugandans. Of course, this didn't happen. There was no way to replace them. As oftentimes happens, he did a brain drain at gunpoint, is the best way to describe it. And of course, rather than having these businesses redistributed to competent people, which certainly did exist at some capacity, it was mostly just picked apart by the military and stolen, because the military is everything and controls everything.
Really, setting yourself up for a successful country by completely dismantling any sort of administrative systems that have been left behind by the end of colonialism, dismantling all business, and just simply asking the question, what if a country was run single-handedly by a big guy.
We brought in our biggest lad to run everything. This is just kind of like Ugandan year zero in a way. Like, we're going to start all the way over. We can't go slowly, you know?
Big ladocracy, I feel like, would almost be a successful like political sea change in Britain. It's like, just get the biggest lad, and I think people would vote for him.
It would certainly benefit me personally, I think. Instead, what happened was he further torpedoed Uganda's economy in a way that arguably it has never recovered from till this day. He created a massive brain drain, like I said, at gunpoint. And there was the bad international PR that comes with being a guy who expels tens of thousands of people from their homes. Back when that mattered, I should point out. That doesn't matter anymore, but depending on who you are. Specifically, the case of Amin's status as a leader in Africa, it wasn't really helping his relations with his neighbors either, who he desperately was trying to win over, all while he was shooting at one of them. His relations with the rest of Africa as a whole were quite bad, owing to the fact of who he was when he came to power, and the fact that as a black African Muslim leader, he kept supporting South Africa and actively worked against his fellow Muslims in Sudan on behalf of Israel and his proxies. So he now has realized he was kind of burning the candle at both ends. And the UK in general, and this turns into something of a popular narrative, likes to frame Amin as something of an idiot or as a big dumb guy.
Mhm.
But he's really not. For the kind of guy that he is, that being a military man with very little formal education, he's quite deft at what he pulls off next. And that is, well, I've alienated the West. What can I do now? Well, I can reject them before they reject me.
It's doing BPD shit. I love it. BPD Idi Amin.
Like, he comes to the conclusion that, of course, he's not going to stop everything that he's doing. He never does. And it was only a matter of time before the UK cuts off relations, the US cuts relations, all this stuff. And by extension, this would eventually lead to the Israelis leaving him behind too. So he's going to beat him to the punch. He's going to reject the West. He's going to publicly disavow Israel. And not only would this shore up African support, but that of the Gulf states, the Soviet Union, and Libya as he swings hard for that Cold War game, you know?
It's really worth pointing out. So, for those who don't know, Uganda is surrounded on all sides by Kenya, Congo, which was then called Zaire at the time, Tanzania in the south, Rwanda. This is a very tumultuous time in East Africa at this point. So he's like, look at, play the fool, act crazy. Maybe people won't notice that I'm killing everyone.
That's kind of what it came down to. Is like the British press wasn't really on his ass yet. That's coming. But he, I think, kind of correctly realizes the only way he's going to survive is if he throws his lot in with most of his neighbors. Not Tanzania exactly, because that's why the Soviets want to support Uganda and would eventually become their number one creditor. Because he's not a leftist at all. He never really even pretends like Obote does and does again at some point. Instead, China is heavily involved in Tanzania. So of course the Soviet Union wants to counter the growing Chinese influence there by supporting Uganda. And that does benefit Idi Amin. He gets more support from the USSR than anyone else up until this point. And obviously, in February of 1972, he flies to Libya to meet with Muammar Gaddafi for the first time. When he returns, he's suddenly giving vicious anti-Israeli speeches, seemingly out of nowhere, and begins to establish professional working relationships with the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, then led by Yasser Arafat. Now, we've gone over Gaddafi's track record, I think, quite a bit on the show. So it begs to suggest that Gaddafi offered Amin massive economic and military support in exchange for dumping Israel as an ally. It should be pointed out that the aid that Libya was going to give Uganda, and eventually does, was not the aid that other countries give. It's not a loan. It's just free money. He's just giving stuff away, no strings attached, obviously assuming that he continues to play the good Muslim leader that at the time Gaddafi was. He wasn't doing African nationalism quite yet. He was still doing like the Muslim Legion type shit. Within weeks of returning, Amin expels Israelis from the country. He also nationalizes British properties. He kicks out Christian missionaries, and in general just begins playing up his new role that Gaddafi would give free money to. Though just because he publicly did all of these things didn't actually mean he believed in any of it. Israeli shell companies kept freely operating in Uganda all the way up until the fall of Idi Amin with his full knowledge. For example, Zimex Airlines was the main supplier for the Ugandan national carrier, Ugandan Airlines, and a go-between for a lot of different weapons suppliers that not only benefited Idi Amin, but various different rebel groups that the Israelis were supporting. Zimex is chaired by Hans Ziegler, who had been a Mossad agent for the better part of 20 years. There are a few other companies like it, and Amin benefited greatly from this relationship. Like, Mossad-adjacent companies were flying in and out of Entebbe airport freely. Of course, this changes a little bit when the Entebbe raid happens, but Israel is always there.
I find this interesting that he, okay, we didn't have the internet yet. He wasn't getting blown up on Twitter yet, but you'd think that the word would get around a little bit. Maybe it did. It feels like the degree of just like public statements, but nothing actually changes. I don't know. You'd think that he would at least make actual legitimate enemies out of some of these countries.
Oh, he absolutely did. By the end, virtually all of his allies, with the exception of Israel, are actively aiding the Tanzanians. And Libya, obviously. Libya plays a huge part in trying to save Idi Amin, but like, he pisses off a lot of people. He just happens to be really useful because East Africa is a pretty important region at the time. You know, to have a guy, it's one of those situations, he's a fucking asshole, but he's our asshole.
Yeah, it benefits you greatly to be in a receipt of income from Africa's greatest pay pig.
Jesus Christ.
Idi Amin is fin-doming Muammar Gaddafi. More jets, more guns. I'll send you pictures of my giant feet.
And Amin and Gaddafi, like, that's a deep romance. We'll get into that more as the series goes on, but this is more of a very close personal friendship.
I don't know how much you guys know about like the personality of Muammar Gaddafi, but if there's one thing Gaddafi really loved above like people having insane politics is he loved a big guy, and he loved Idi Amin was like a fucking like commanding presence.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why Muammar Gaddafi funded one of, if not the largest mosques in Africa to be built in Kampala. It's still there. It's named after Gaddafi to this day.
When I eventually convert, I will make my pilgrimage there.
Are you going to Mecca? Kind of. My own. I'm going to the Colonel of Muammar Gaddafi's mosque in Kampala to revert. Amin was getting more and more paranoid as well, specifically about invasion from Tanzania. Now, this could be an invasion by Tanzanians, but this flip-flop back and forth. Other times it was the British, the Americans, or the Israelis using Tanzania as a stepping off point. But either way, he was always paranoid about Tanzania in one way or another. And here's the weird part. He was kind of right. There was an invasion from Tanzania coming, but it wasn't from the Tanzanians, it wasn't from the United States, the UK, or Israel. Instead, it was by the Front for National Salvation, or FRONASA, led by Yoweri Museveni. This is a group made up of left-wing Ugandan exiles who had been held up in Tanzania and to a lesser extent Sudan, who had been hitting out at Ugandan forces on the border for months. Tanzania did support them pretty much openly, as Nyerere still did not recognize Amin as Uganda's president, though he did keep FRONASA on something of a leash for fear that if he really let them go nuts, the Israelis and the British would support Amin, and Amin would straight up invade Tanzania. But things have changed, because Amin was now publicly telling all of those people to fuck off. So Amin chased away the support that Nyerere was worried about. So he said, fuck yeah, let's go. And they planned a militia-based invasion of Uganda. The invasion was going to be two-pronged. An overland invasion accompanied by an airborne assault out of a civilian plane onto Entebbe airfield. Now, because this series does not end at part 2, this obviously does not work. The plan was to storm through Entebbe and raid Kampala. The two are very close together. The entire mission would only include about 1,300 men, which is not that many, but it was hoped that this whole thing would be such a surprise that the Ugandan military would just collapse.
You'd really hate to be the guy who works at like Subway at Entebbe airport. Like, it's just like, man, I'm just trying to heat up this like hearty Italian bread and I keep getting shot.
I went to my day job at the Entebbe duty-free shop and caught an RPG straight through the window.
I'm just trying to sell cognac and I keep getting RPGs through the display and I have to sweep up the glass.
Now, this plan did not work, mostly because someone, we don't know who, leaked the plans to Amin. It's thought it could be anyone at play here, from Kenyan intelligence, Southerners in Uganda, who saw something suspicious and hated Obote, so they're like, oh, we have to run and tell Amin because this is obviously Obote trying to come back to power. It could have been the UK. It could have been anybody. Some say it was even the Soviet Union to try to keep the two sides like out of a war. That, hey, if we leak the shit, they'll both like calm down. Then if that wasn't bad enough, the rebels themselves worked hard to fuck this up all on their own. For starters, the plan about grabbing a civilian plane and invading, well, they did get one. But enter Obote, who insisted that he play a role in the invasion despite the fact that he and Yoweri Museveni are not exactly political allies. Naire kind of forces this role because he still sees Obote as the future leader of any Amin-free Uganda. Museveni listens because obviously he needs Tanzanian support. And Obote selects a friend's son to be the plane's pilot. He was a pilot. However, he had zero experience flying a DC-9, which is the kind of plane that Tanzania supplied him with. So the plane takes off from Dar es Salaam Airport en route to Kilimanjaro Airport to pick up this commando team that's meant to be landing at Entebbe Airport. He flies the whole way with the landing gear down. And he's unsure as to why he has a hard time controlling the plane and almost crashing. But he doesn't crash the plane, at least not until he tries to land. He lands way too hard and way too fast, blowing out all the tires on the landing gear, grounding the plane and ending the airborne invasion before it even began.
Fucking hell.
The ground invasion continues anyway, but it's so rushed that the Tanzanians didn't even have enough time to supply all of the rebels with guns. So there's just a bunch of lads packed into civilian cars and trucks trying to get over the border. They create a traffic jam, which then turns into like a 50-car pileup on the road. So their military campaign turns into a clusterfuck.
That scene from Blues Brothers with all the police cars.
Yeah, all of the exiles driving the cars have the same AI driving as the guys from GTA, just flying through the air at 1,000 speed. This completely bogs down the invasion and gives Amin enough time to move his men into place and kill hundreds of rebels because he sends tanks, because he has a lot of them. And the rebels are not outfitted at all to fight tanks, despite the fact that everybody knew Idi Amin had a lot of tanks. Big oversight. Invasion fails.
Idi Amin won. Everyone else, 0.
Idi Amin's accidentally putting up dubs. Like, people have to help him, and then he takes all the credit for it. I mean, this would it have worked if Obote's kid's friend actually knew how to fly a plane? Maybe. Hard to say. I mean, they did try to take over Uganda with less than a division, which seems unwise. Also, no heavy weapons or anti-armor or artillery, which seems not like a great plan. I don't know. As a result of the failure, Amin once again begins purging Obote loyalists from the government and military, who at this point are mostly imaginary. He's killed or exiled most of them already. Naire, pretty embarrassed by this whole thing, agrees to sit down for a treaty meeting between him and Idi Amin, chaired by Syed Barre, the dictator of Somalia and noted Hitler mustache haver. Also, weirdly enough, Julius Nyerere at this point, also Hitler mustache. So they have a majority at the table at this point. Very obviously not a political mustache in this context, but it's weird that there's two of them. Now, they eventually agreed to the Mogadishu Accords, which create something of a DMZ along the Tanzanian-Ugandan border. Though only Tanzania holds to the agreement and pulls their soldiers several miles back. The agreement doesn't really solve any of the underlying issues at play here. Naire still supports Obote as both head of state and an insurgent leader. He also obviously supports every other militia group floating around in Tanzania at this point. And Amin still wants to take over the Kagera salient. And he also occasionally talks about toppling Naire in general. It depends on what day you catch Amin on what his war against Tanzania really means. The shooting didn't even really stop at the border, though this time it's almost entirely exile militias rather than the Tanzanian military doing the shooting. And this is where we get to the period of, I guess you could consider it, Idi Amin doing all the shit people have heard of. For example, in 1973, the UK is going through a pretty bad recession, famously so. So as like a sarcastic fuck you to the UK for blowing him off, he creates the Save Britain Fund. This is a fake aid organization which Idi Amin solicits Ugandan donations to give to the British in need. He steals all the money. He doesn't actually give any of it away.
I mean, that is a very, very funny troll because, yeah, this is right around the time post-oil crisis, the 3-day work week and stuff like that in the UK. Like, yeah, stuff's not great economically.
Yeah, he does all sorts of shit like this. Like, everybody's seen the picture of the white people kneeling in front of him, getting carried around in a sedan chair. This is where Amin is really fucking with the British. He calls himself the last king of Scotland, things of that nature.
Sometimes you look at you gotta respect game, like that is top level posting, but you know, unfortunately it is Idi Amin.
Yeah, I don't want to hand it to Idi Amin, but he was a top level troll to the British.
Game recognized game.
And he did this to spite the British government specifically to make them look bad. But what he really does is actually piss off the British media, which he consumes daily. Remember how I talked about he was getting those whiskey runs from Stansted Airport to Kampala full of whiskey and shit? He's also getting British newspapers with it. So he's reading everything they're saying about him, which at this point went from being very pro Amin to being kind of sort of starting to talk about the fucked up shit he was doing. And then he creates the Save Britain Fund, and all of the British newspapers rapidly turn against him. They start talking about all the terror and violence he was doing, which make him even madder. Yeah, stuff like that.
The only man that I know who hates Britain as much as Idi Amin is you, Nate.
I mean, fine. You know what? Like you said, game recognized game.
Idi Amin also started off as a Tiabu.
Well, I mean, I had the slight excuse of the fact that my mom is from the United Kingdom, but having lived there as an adult, I realized that the easiest way to disabuse yourself of being an Anglophile is to live in Britain and experience what it's like.
Yeah, Amin only had to go there once.
But also I would imagine too, it's like we're talking about the early 70s. You piss off the British media, they'll get their best political cartoonists on it. Can you imagine how racist those cartoons must have been?
You can Google it. They're real bad. Yeah, they look an awful lot like the shit that you showed me at the live show.
Fucking A. Wyatt Man and stuff like that, like the white nationalist cartoons. I mean, like,
also your mom may have been British. Idi Amin technically born in the Empire, so.
Yeah, there you have it.
And he was the last king of Scotland.
Yeah, we recognize this claim, weirdly enough.
I guess I'm the first king of Switzerland then.
Well, he claims Scotland, which means technically you can claim Wales or England.
It's the worst part. I mean, Wales.
Tom obviously gets Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Can I work for Muammar Gaddafi instead, please?
Well, you're a little late to that party.
Yeah.
So biographers and historians generally think Amin's response to British media, that being trolling them, had less to do with geopolitics and more to do with Amin being legitimately upset that the British didn't like him. Like, people have equated this to being a kind of jilted lover, because he was still very much in love with the British. He wore his British uniform constantly. He still wanted to form his military like how he was trained. He wanted to be friends with the British without changing what he's doing, of course, and stopping pissing them off in various ways. But yeah, he kind of reacts as, I don't know, someone who's like really obsessed with a place and go like those people. Have you ever heard of Paris syndrome? They're like obsessed with Paris. They finally go there, realize it sucks, and they get really, really like depressed.
Well, yeah, it's basically that Paris isn't this postcard paradise. It's a city of like 10 million people. Yeah. And the postcard attraction stuff is there, but also like it's a big
so
European
are the
city
French
that's crowded. And yeah, I mean, whatever, you know, Paris is nice, but Paris is like, if you haven't been to New York, for example, like you're not necessarily prepared for a place. It's better now, but that's like as just old and beat up and dirty and there's graffiti everywhere. And like, yeah, it's not as, it's like, I don't know if I've never been to Greece, but if you do Google Street View Athens, if you've never been to Athens, I've never been. No. Do a Google Street View and square what Athens looks like in real life with your mental concept of what you think Greece is like.
Someone should show this to Lord Byron.
I know, exactly. It's like, Lord Byron, I hate to break it to you, but not only do they not speak ancient Greek, they have this thing called a ductless mini split air conditioner, and they put it on every building.
So like that's kind of why Amin reacts. He doesn't really get depressed because he's a very angry man. He reacts by getting very, very angry. And he finally pisses off the British government through trolling the press to the point that they cut his whiskey runs to Stansted Airport, so he doesn't get his pallet full of booze anymore.
God damn.
But at the same time, Amin finally finds his real supporters as the Soviet Union and allied countries begin to lavish him with all of the shit he previously wanted from the Israelis and the Brits. The Soviets dumped unending military and economic support at him without really worrying about him paying him back. Like, yeah, it would have been nice if he paid off some of his loans, but they weren't too upset when he just constantly threw them in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
And East Germany helped him reform the intelligence services from the pro-Obote GSU of old to create, effectively, the Ugandan Stasi. Previous to this, Amin had dissolved the GSU and created something called the State Research Bureau, or SRB. They had little to do with intelligence and everything to do with widespread murder and torture. And not to defend East Germany here or anything, but they were already doing that a long time before they started getting training. They just got better at it. After the training, their murder spree went into overdrive, earning them the local nickname, the State Research Butchers. They planted a wide array of spies in everyday life, creating a system of narcs, in case that sounds familiar to any East German heads out there, and use that information to turn other people on their side, and more often than not, start killing them. And unlike virtually any other branch of the Amin government, they kept detailed notes of all the torture, murder, and so-called disappearances that they were involved in. They were so good at keeping up with this, they even used a computer to help track it all. And that's pretty remarkable when you remember this is happening between 1971 and 1979. The computer was also donated by East Germany, but you know what I mean? Like, they got really, really good at being awful. And you're probably wondering, because I know I was, mental picture, what do these SRB guys look like? Well, they dress in a very specific manner. Sunglasses, floral paneled shirts, and bell bottoms, all while smoking a massive quantity of weed. So, the East German trained Ugandan hippie death squads.
Sure, dude, let's kill dissidents, man.
So it's basically like the Ugandan version of like what dudes in the Bronx looked like getting beaten up by guys whose idol is Tony Danza, except they're Central African. Well, more than beaten up, getting killed. It's sort of like the dark energy uncle, like just floral shirts. I bet their sandals were fucking fly as hell.
Actually, hold that thought about sandals. It's weirdly that's going to come up. It's best you don't try to wonder why.
Okay. Okay.
I imagine these guys had like the disco stew platform shoes with goldfish inside, just punching some guy in the face. It's like, I'm not laughing at the horrible crimes they did, but the whiplash of what they look like to what they're doing is insane.
I hate getting murdered by the evil version of the Mac.
Well, it's kind of like Rockstar Games always doing their conceptions of what America's like as viewed by a bunch of Scottish guys making a video game. And this sounds like the Scots making a version of Grand Theft Auto, except like what they think like Haitian gangsters would look like.
It's the Ugandan version of the Tonton Makoots, you mean?
Yeah, it's in the 70s.
I mean, kind of. They kind of are.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that there's a pretty big overlap in a state-sponsored death squad that beats your ass across the world, you know? And at this time, it's like, well, you know, they dressed the part. Bell bottoms were in.
Yeah, I think the only ones that I can think of that were dressing somewhat differently is like the Khmer Rouge and the KGB. Like, they have very strict dress codes. Everybody else is just kind of dressing like hippie trash. The SRB headquarters became an industrialized underground torture and murder facility. People had their eyes ripped out with screwdrivers, their genitals brutalized with electricity, and their skin flayed open, all before being murdered and having their corpses dumped in the woods outside of Kampala. They really made no attempt to hide these bodies either. They just chucked them out in the open in the woods. So, of course, after describing that, it should come as no surprise as the Gulf states embraced Amin as a brother. This included the Saudi king gifting him a new private jet, making sure it was a much nicer and newer private jet than the Israelis had given him just a year before.
Habibi, come to Jeddah.
Amin probably wishes he lived long enough to see Dubai in its current form. He would love it.
Born too soon to experience Labubu Dubai chocolate matcha latte.
Yeah, exactly. For the first time since Amin had taken over, other African states had begun to accept him somewhat. Of course, this does not mean Tanzania or Kenya. They still fucking hate him. That being said, even with all of this help, Uganda was in ruins. All of Uganda's exports were down, in the best case scenario, 75%. All while the cost of living for your regular Ugandan had gone up by 50. To try to fix this, Amin set fixed prices for goods, which is good in theory, but this is Idi Amin we're talking about. The cost of everything went up, and he set prices so people could afford them, as far as he understood it. But Idi Amin does not understand economics in any capacity, communist or capitalist, it really does not matter. So he forced people to sell goods at such a low price that they could not afford to restock their shelves once they sold out.
What year are we kind of talking about now?
It's like 75.
Fair.
And shopkeepers were forced to obey these fixed prices or the SRB would disappear them. So shops were rapidly emptied out and they couldn't be refilled. It was benefiting nobody. So people did what people always do, and that is create a parallel economy system that could actually work for them so they didn't starve to death. This is known as the Magendo, best understood as a black market for everyday life, normally based on smuggling into and out of Kenya or Tanzania. Of course, for a desperately poor country, this meant that while it benefited people who just wanted to live, it hamstringed the state even further because obviously nobody's paying any taxes on this shit. Also, not that that matters because Idi Amin would just steal the money. It's not like he was doing any projects for anybody's life to get better. This informal, parallel smuggling-based economy became a point of obsession for Amin. He wanted to crush it and unleash the SRB with the main goal of destroying it. Anyone even remotely suspected of smuggling vanished, leading to them killing people who had nothing to do with any of it other than just having food, which was inherently suspicious at this point. But the SRB didn't do a good enough job for Amin's pleasing, so he hired a close personal friend, former British Army officer and mercenary Bob Astley's, to run a anti-smuggling death squad. Astley's nickname amongst Ugandans was the White Rat, in case you're wondering how much they hated him.
Got to get a Baz in there at some point.
Astley's is an interesting character. He pops up in the Amin story constantly. A lot of this is Astley's just really likes to lie about his life, but he was involved in a lot of horrible shit.
It kind of sounds like he basically was Jonathan Adema avant la lettre kind of thing. And Idi Amin was like, that's the kind of person I need in my inner circle.
Yeah, Bob Astley's is what would happen if Jonathan Adema actually was legitimate. We talked about the British guy that was acting as a go-between for his smuggling in the last episode. That was also Bob Astley's. Like, he is the one British guy he is on speed dial at all times. After this, Amin empowered the Defense Council. This was a body of military men that were unelected, obviously, and he put them over the parliament, and he empowered them to be the new group of people to give Idi Amin legal cover for what he was doing. For starters, when you look up Idi Amin, you're going to see a whole bunch of initials after his name, like in the British custom of when you get medals. That's most people probably assume those were given to him by the British. They were not. And those initials and placements were on purpose because the Defense Council, on Amin's urging, gave him all kinds of medals, all of them modeled on British tradition, like the Victory Cross rather than the Victoria Cross. So it could still be abbreviated as VC. See what I mean? He did this at like the Military Cross, the Distinguished Military Order, all of these things. So when you add those initials to the end of Idi Amin's name, which he did in his official title, you could assume that they would be British military orders, which does make sense when you remember that he's completely made up the vast majority of his actual British military record, namely his mysterious non-service during World War II that he liked to talk about all the time.
Yeah, I actually got the DSC, the Dangerous Soup Cauldron.
Like I said, this is the era of Idi Amin doing the shit that people have heard of. Like, he bans women from wearing pants or wigs in public. He divorces all of his Christian-born wives and marries new Muslim ones, shit like that. Several members of his own cabinet defect and run to the UK, something that will continue as the years go on as he promotes new people to replace his old ones. Because being close to Idi Amin ends up being very, very dangerous. The Defense Council then made him president for life, and then Idi Amin created what is on the list of crazy dictator things that he ends up doing is, in my opinion, the wildest. And that is the Keep Uganda Clean program. The Keep Uganda Clean program was based on Amin's own personal obsession with hygiene and cleanliness, but also on his own fuck-ups. For example, he expelled the South Asians from the country, and wouldn't you have guessed it, this had several consequences that Idi Amin could never see coming. One of those is getting rid of virtually every qualified mechanic in Uganda. This torpedoed the nation's military, something we will definitely talk about much more in depth later, but it also meant that every garbage truck in Uganda was non-functioning at this point. This in turn led to trash just piling up everywhere.
You'd think that a man so obsessed with British culture would understand the centrality of the bins.
He not only expelled the guys who fix the bins, but also the bin men.
The bin men aren't even hard anymore. They're not there. There's no more bin men.
People in the UK should thank their tradition of strong bin men to Idi Amin for sending them all your way. So Amin, taking a suggestion from Mobutu Sese Seko, of all people, began what was effectively a corvée, forcing the nation's populations to take to the street and clean up everything by hand. This is also done under threat of violence.
So it's like Great Leap Forward, but for picking up the trash.
Yeah, they're not killing birds or anything, but they have to go pick up all the shit that Idi Amin broke. Like, patch up all the drywall he's punched through. You know, you name it. But it went further than that. This program covered everything, including personal hygiene and how clean you kept your own home. So, of course, a Stasi-like network of informers was formed, all ratting each other out. So, like, hey, Tom, Nate over there fucking stinks. House isn't clean. And then you're probably wondering what would happen if you got reported to the garbage Stasi like this. They would bulldoze your home.
Can't have roaches in your crib if you ain't got a crib.
That's right.
I mean, I just love this idea. It's just like, yeah, sorry, getting your ass beat by the Tauntaun Macoutes because you didn't make your bed. It's kind of like what you're describing. Like, wow, he made the 82nd Airborne.
Imagine if you were like the SRB guy, not the psychos in the torture base, but like a dude who's like a true believer in carrying out these orders. And then like, oh, you have a new assignment. You have to go to every third person, just give them a strong whiff and see if they've cleaned themselves today. And if not, you got to destroy their house. Oh, and then, of course, after you bulldoze the house, you got to pick it up, which people would then be forced to pick up the wreckage by hand.
So it's basically reverse Katamari Damacy. You have to basically break the house into smaller and smaller pieces instead of putting it in one big ball.
Make big house into littler house until there's no house anymore. The governor of Kampala went so far on this program as to declare sandals to be naturally unhygienic and then ban them from the city. Now, this is a problem because this is the most common footwear in all of Uganda, namely because it's very cheap and people are obviously quite poor, thanks to Idi Amin and Milton Obote.
It's also hot there.
Also,
it's hot as
it's
fuck.
hot as shit.
You might be wondering again, if they bulldoze your house for not vacuuming that day or whatever, what do they do if you get caught wearing sandals? Well, you'd get arrested and get the shit kicked out of you and sometimes be forced to literally eat your sandals as punishment.
What?
Yeah. Yep.
How do you
You gotta eat the motherfucking sandals. You gotta eat your kicks, dude. And mind you that the specific type of sandals that they're wearing are mostly made out of like discarded tires.
Oh man.
Yeah.
This is disgusting. Like it had that thin layer of darkly comic, but now it's just disgusting.
This is when you hit it with that Uno verse card. They force you to eat your sandals. So you reach into your backpack, you pull out a nice plate, a fork, a knife, and a bib. You tuck it in, and you just start slicing away sandal steak and eating it and commenting on it. And it's going to fuck them up. Like, they're not going to expect this. Like, you're supposed to hate eating your sandal. Like, joke's on you. I've been standing in teriyaki sauce all day.
Joke's on you. My sandals are actually houses that haven't been swept. Now you have to clean them up, bitch.
But the campaign also covered personal behaviors and status that Idi Amin found as personally disgusting, like being a single woman or unemployed or a sex worker or an alcoholic, despite the fact that Idi Amin was an alcoholic himself.
I'm just slowly coming to the conclusion that Piers Morgan should have been born a couple of decades earlier so he could have like co-hosted a show with Idi Amin, because they just have the exact same point of view.
Nobody should envision a podcast hosted by Piers Morgan and Idi Amin in their head like I'm doing right now. Anyone caught, I don't know, just existing like that would normally be beaten up by the SRB and the police and then effectively exiled to work on rural farms, most of which were failing, and ironically, accidentally inflating the smuggling economy because now they're on the border region and they can just smuggle more stuff into Kampala.
But like, there's a problem here is like, the reason there's no jobs is because of Idi Amin.
Yes, that is a huge part of the problem. Idi Amin is a foundational problem in everything we're talking about.
Like, this is a cyclical make work program where he's destroying the economy, making people unemployed, then employing people to kidnap the unemployed, to then employ them on farms.
Yes. I guess it's good if you're a bulldozer operator.
You're the only people who are fucking employed.
According to British Foreign Minister David Owen, it was around this time that the killings began to ramp up, as you can obviously see why. And no amount of British pressure that they put on Amin would stop them. So the British government began openly contemplating murdering Idi Amin. According to Owen, the main thing stopping them was MI6 saying there's probably no way they could do it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, Britain's capacity to do this would have been a bit of a challenge. It would have been a huge embarrassment if they had gotten caught. Chances are good that if they sent British agents and it failed, they'd all be killed publicly. I could see why they'd say that. And also, it's like everything you've described about Idi Amin so far makes him sound incredibly paranoid. And I imagine he had
Oh, yeah.
I mean, consider like he's, you know, he created a secret police to make you fucking dry your hands with a hand towel after you wash them. I assume that the people who actually protect him are like formed of many dudes in floral print shirts who can stomp your ass. Like, it's basically two of those guys on each other's shoulders guarding him at all times.
And since they got rid of all the bin men, there's no way for MI6 to blend in naturally.
Well, yeah, it was like basically like Idi Amin. Basically, he's like, we already have a security force that can dole out punishments in public, but I have to be extra protected. So every one of my guards is going to be Vincent Adult Man of three of those guys in a coat, and they're going to guard me.
If you're keeping track of the years, you probably know what's coming next because we've already covered it before on a bonus episode, and that is the raid on Entebbe. If you remember from that episode, Kenya actively assisted the Israelis in raiding Entebbe airport to rescue hostages taken by the PFLP. In the lead up to that, Amin had begun to make random claims over Kenyan territory, similar to what he was doing to Tanzania, which in turn led to Kenya to just shut off Ugandan access to the port of Mombasa, the only real route of Ugandan export to the world at large. Kenya eventually reopened Mombasa to Uganda from other pressure, mainly the British, in exchange for a regular payment that was quite large and Uganda could not afford. But the relations are obviously getting really, really, really bad. And so, therefore, Kenya gives a hand to the Israelis to fuck up Amin's shit. Somewhat ironically, despite Amin hating Kenya, Kenya was benefiting massively from his mistakes. Due to Amin pretty much failing every attempt at baby's first economics, Kenyan businesses were making a killing off of the Ugandans. This is because you might be wondering where most of the black market stuff came from. Some of it came from Tanzania, but the vast, vast majority of it came from Kenyan businesses who could sell shit to Ugandans without paying taxes and have them smuggle it over the border. They were making out like bandits. It literally benefited everyone in Kenya and fucked up everyone in Uganda. So by being so bad at his job, Idi Amin only benefited all the people he hated.
He's become the waiter for his haters at the table of success.
That's exactly where my mind went. Imagine you decide that you're going to go spit in the soup to piss off your haters, but unfortunately your haters are your waiters and they're serving you that same soup.
In the aftermath of the Entebbe raid, Ugandan security forces murdered one of the hijacking victims that had been taken to a local hospital. We talked about this on the bonus episode a bit more. They claimed that she was a spy, despite the fact she was just some poor old woman and a British citizen. The British government, in turn, cut off diplomatic relations with Uganda. But as the years went on, the Brits would hardly be the only Western government that Amin pushed a bit too far. We already talked about how Amin was centralizing religious authority in the country around one specific Islamic organization. He had banned missionaries, but he hadn't banned the practice of Christianity, though he only did recognize two Christian churches, the Catholics and the Anglicans. They were free to practice as long as they kept to the Bible and didn't say shit about the government, at least for a while, because remember, he's very paranoid. As the years went on, that paranoia would only grow. He saw plots against him pretty much anywhere he went. both real and imagined, because there were some real plots as well. He eventually saw the churches as a breeding ground for rebellion, so the SRB raided the home of Anglican Archbishop Janani Luwum, arrested him, and accused him of working with pro-Obote exiles, or just Tanzania. They weren't entirely sure. This led to the rest of the country's bishops to pen an open letter of protest to Amin for the man's treatment, as well as a general complaint about the shit state of Uganda at large. Amin responded in the way Amin responds to pretty much anything like this, by murdering the archbishop. But don't worry, he frames it as a car accident. This frame job was quite shoddy due to the fact that he was killed by being shot several times and then just having his body shoved into a car. Yeah.
I was about to say, it's like, damn, the bullets that I had installed in my windshield seemed to kill me. I don't know
was
what
thinking
happened.
more along the lines of like, yeah, it's really tragic what a car can do to a human, especially when the car is parked and stationary and the human just keeps hitting it with their body until they die.
I hate accidentally putting a bullet in my mouth instead of a cigarette and then going to light it with the cigarette lighter and shooting myself in the throat.
I knew I shouldn't have filled my airbag container full of 9mm bullets. So in response, Amin bans virtually all Christian activity for being in league with the rebels, despite there being zero evidence that any of this was happening. And along with Luwum, Amin ordered the arrest of a couple of cabinet ministers who happened to be from the same region as him for good measure. This kind of thing, the arresting and vanishing of those close to him, had been happening ever since he took power, but now was becoming so commonplace that being in Amin's inner circle was quite possibly the most dangerous position for a civil servant in Uganda to have. This is the case for one general, Mustafa Idrisi, commissioned as an officer back in 1967, trained by the Israelis and deeply involved with the coup that brought Amin to power. He helped suppress various mutinies against Amin. He actively took part in the general military terror over the country. He climbed the ranks to the post of Minister of Defense, at which point he courted the loyalty of Ugandan soldiers by paying them bonuses and giving them gifts, which was possible thanks to Idrisi's cartoonish levels of corruption, which was commonplace, of course, for anybody of his rank in Uganda at the time. He also advocated for dismissing the Sudanese that Amin brought in to fill the ranks and advocating they be filled with Ugandans instead. This brought him into conflict with multiple other people that were also loyal to Amin, namely the commander of the Ugandan Marine Corps, which is an interesting branch of the military to have in a landlocked country. The feud between the two got so heated that at one point they just began fucking shooting at each other. They hit nothing, mind you, but they did have a shootout in the street one day. Idrisi was eventually appointed vice president of Uganda, a kind of promotion that is also a demotion, because Amin didn't need a vice president. He hadn't had one in 6 years, but by giving him one, he kind of promoted him up and out of the way. Upon giving him the position, he asked Idrisi to resign as Minister of Defense, which he refused to do. A few months later, while Idrisi was driving with the security detachment, a station wagon slammed into his car and several people piled out of it and began shooting at him. Somehow he survived this. Clearly, Amin was trying to take him out and failed, and Idrisi never publicly blamed him and recovered from his wounds in Egypt, all while Amin denounced him, stripped him of all of his titles, and blamed him for plotting a coup, which he wasn't. In the aftermath of the assassination attempt, a regiment of soldiers loyal to Idrisi mutinied, fought off all the soldiers sent to crush them, and then fled over the border to Tanzania. So, of course, Amin then blamed Tanzania for doing all of this. He loves trying to assassinate people in car accidents. That was another thing that was happening more and more frequently by 1978. Amin constantly claiming that invasions were going to come from Tanzania, like we said. The Obote loyalists, the Tanzanians themselves, the US, the Israelis, none of which was true, no matter how many people he had executed for spying. Amin's best homie, Gaddafi, got closer and closer to him, and Libya was effectively propping up Uganda as much as any of it could be propped up. But that didn't mean Uganda was improving. Instead, Amin just kept dismissing ministers while others simply ran for their lives, normally all going to the UK. By this point, Amin was officially or unofficially President for Life, Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Finance. All while most of the world was finally turning against him as the UN began investigating him for various human rights violations. Something that was so obvious at this point that not even the Soviet Union tried to get the UN to leave them alone. Like, yeah, we're lending him a ton of money, but yeah, you're right. He's a real piece of shit. Countries slapped them with sanctions, mostly targeting coffee exports, and stopped oil shipments. So Uganda's in really bad fucking shape. And that brings us back to the Ugandan Tanzanian border. The border was long and porous. Smuggling and cattle rustling were commonplace, as was the activity of pro-Obote, or at the very least, anti-Amin rebel groups. Attacks across the border were, if not a daily occurrence, were at minimum a weekly one. And there's no real difference at this point between rebel groups and the Ugandan military. We talked about this before. The Ugandan military is a little more than a roving gang of bandits in uniform. The best way to describe the border region is one of pure, violent chaos at all times. And if you haven't picked up on it quite yet, despite Amin being a military strongman, a man who derived all of his power from the barrel of a gun, a man obsessed with military-style discipline and cleanliness, as a broad organization, the Ugandan military was horribly factionalized. That is because a military dictatorship is actually very bad for the military, for things like basic soldiering in general. When a soldier becomes a politician, it inherently turns the military from a body with a job of defending a country, hypothetically, to a political body with the job of running it. It turns soldiers into politicians, bureaucrats, businessmen, everything a country is supposed to need to run, while simultaneously making it impossible to have a functioning military. Promotions become political tools. Base locations become political tools. Everything becomes a political tool to show up support and loyalty because the same group of people you empowered can also kill you whenever they want. And without the basic rules of law, human rights, or really any other kind of guiding principles involved, things fly off the track at breakneck speed. When the military becomes involved in politics, it makes officers have to court their own men, which in turn makes those officers more warlords than military officers. It's kind of like whenever we talk about the Roman Empire, when Roman legions would declare their commander emperor because they liked him a lot, and then they would invade Rome, just kind of doing whatever the hell you want with no oversight, hoping to enrich the men and in turn enrich yourselves. And it's for all of those reasons that when war finally breaks out between Uganda and Tanzania in October of 1978, we don't actually know how or why it kicks off. Not entirely. There is kind of, sort of, a mostly accepted story of what happened, though. What I'm telling you guys is I have to tell you a story of how a bar fight led to the fall of Idi Amin.
Yes!
On the evening of October 9th, 1978, a young Ugandan officer stationed in the Mutukula garrison near the Tanzania border decided, you know what? I want a drink. It was really not uncommon for Ugandans to cross the border into Tanzania for whatever reason from time to time. 99% of the time, nothing would come from this. Most of the time, it would just result in Ugandans having a couple of drinks and smuggling shit back and forth with their Tanzanian counterparts, military and civilian alike. However, this time, for whatever reason, the officer got this shit kicked out of him at the bar. So he retreats from the ass beating, goes back across the border, grabs his AK, goes back and shoots up the bar. He doesn't hit anybody, but, it's the principle of the matter. At this point, after burning off 30 rounds into the local pub, he decides he might need to go tell his commander, Lieutenant Biansi, about what happened. Biansi, in turn, gets on the phone and calls his battalion commander, Colonel Juma Ricconi. Ricconi is a man that requires a bit of an explanation. He was, by all accounts, an illiterate, crazy person. But because he came from the Kakwa tribe, he was brought into the army as an officer, having never received a single day of training or even education, but earned his keep being deathly loyal to Idi Amin. Personally killing or ordering people killed that Amin didn't like, disappearing people, whatever Amin needed, he knew he could ask Ricconi to do it. By the time Amin came to power in the coup Ricconi helped him with, he was well known for being very unstable mentally, even by his fellow officers. According to those officers, he thought that he was a kind of demigod, a reincarnation of some kind of deity, though he could never really tell you which one exactly. Something biblical, but it would change on the day. But Amin loved this guy, even though all of his peers had given him the nickname Butubika, which was the name of a large psych ward in Kampala. Yeah, he's everything I read about him is absolutely insane. He was continuously promoted, eventually leading the military tribunal, a legal body that Amin created so he could just ignore civilian judges. Almost every single case Ricconi oversaw ended in a death sentence, a sentence he'd like to personally watch be carried out. During all of those times Amin threatened to invade Tanzania, virtually the only senior officer in Uganda that agreed with Amin was Ricconi, whereas the others, even if they were largely promoted with limited knowledge of military matters, were pretty open, telling Amin that, like, look, I don't know shit about the military, even though I'm a colonel, but we are not prepared to fucking invade Tanzania. Ricconi, nah. He was like, no, I'm just here for the violence. The guy who started the bar fight in Tanzania, well, that was Ricconi's brother-in-law. So Ricconi immediately ordered Beyonce to invade what was known as the Kagera salient. At this point, to this day, there is no evidence that anybody has told Idi Amin about any of this. So Beyonce follows orders quickly. I mean, look at who his commander is. He better fucking do what he's told or he's going to get put into a literal wood chipper. And Ugandan soldiers invade Tanzania. And the Tanzanian side of the border is left virtually undefended, thanks to following the rules laid out by the Mogadishu Agreement. Ugandan soldiers pull into a town, set a couple houses on fire, start stealing shit. A Tanzanian outpost about, I think it was like 35 kilometers away, notice what's happening. They alert their commander, Colonel Morris Singano, who orders his artillery to open fire. Now, it should be noted here that neither the Ugandan artillery nor the Tanzanian artillery has any kind of forward controllers. Nobody is really aiming this shit. They have no scouting aircraft at all, really. More of a kind of spray and pray. But the Tanzanian guns managed to hit a Ugandan APC, which was a Polish-built vehicle, and it completely explodes, killing 2 soldiers. Ugandan artillery then responds, but bombs some random hillside because they aren't entirely sure how to aim. And this kind of turns into an artillery duel, back and forth over the border, and the Ugandan soldiers on the ground turn around, drive back into Uganda at this point because they just saw 2 of their friends get ethered by the most lucky shot that an artillery crewman has ever pulled off. What nobody knows is that this border spat, another one of what could probably be hundreds at this point, was about to spiral wildly out of control, draw on several world and regional powers, and end with the overthrow of Idi Amin. And that is where we'll pick up next time on part 3.
Oh, this is not going to go well.
It might be the most consequential bar fight in at least African history. I don't know about world history, but this shit's going to go places.
This just sounds very grim. Like, it just sounds like a endless recursion of dumb guys doing dumber shit, but violently and cruelly. And then it just gets bigger and bigger. It is actually Katamari Damacy, but for being a big dumb asshole.
Like, none of this ever had to happen. I mean, certainly Idi Amin never had to come to power either, but like, it's often framed as Idi Amin invaded Tanzania, which is true. He's the head of state. He's the dictator. He's in charge of the military, which means the responsibility falls on him. However, there's no evidence that Ricconi even fucking called him. Otherwise, as we'll find out in part 3, that Idi Amin jumps on the bandwagon and immediately gets involved in the war, and he's making public statements immediately. Like, so if he knew right from the get-go, he would almost certainly say, fuck yeah, let's party, because he's wanted to do this for so long. But it is very funny that the military strongman has effectively lost control of his military, which is always what happens eventually. But that's the Kagera War Part 2. Boys, thank you for joining me. Everybody listening, thank you for joining us as well. Consider supporting the show on Patreon. $5 a month gets you absolutely everything, from every regular episode early, almost 8 years of bonus content at this point, side series Discord access, first dibs on live show tickets and merch. It'll get you 1 Polish-made APC blown up by Tanzanian artillery. And, leave us a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. Fellas, you host other shows. Plug those shows.
I am the co-host, producer, somewhat involved in a number of shows. What a Hell of Waste Dad, Trash Future, Kill James Bond, No Gods, No Mayors.
Beneath Skin, show about the history of everything told through the history of tattooing, and Bloodwork, a show about the economy of violence.
As always, thank you again, and until next time, don't have your military kind of sort of commanded by a guy whose nickname is named after the local psych ward. Or do.
Don't eat your sandals.
Don't eat your shoes.
Don't eat your sandals. Yeah, that's better. Or at least saute them. I don't know. Eat your sandals correctly.
Shoes aren't food, they're for feet.